rocksploitation movies. Not Elvis. Elvis was a genre to himself, though sharing some motifs. I'm talking movies that had rock in the title, in which, by a mistake explained in an early scene, some hot act like Little Richard gets booked to some society soiree where they're expecting Lester Lannon. You don't remember Lester? Think Lawrence Welk for 20-somethings, even teens, yes, who reached our teens sans anthems of our own, listening to music only when our parents did. Yes, I did say our. I do include myself. The first album that I ever bought was Carousel, then Glenn Miller, Louis Armstrong. I was 40-plus records into my first carefully indexed box of 45s before ever I heard Ray Charles, and never was the same again. But I was talking rocksploitation movies, the shock on dowagers' faces when they first glimpsed the musicians, the casual verbal misconnection when the Margaret Dumont character is nonplussed by teen slang that had already left the building a year before this movie hit the theaters, always as the front end of a double bill with some Kirk Douglas movie maybe. I got my first kiss after Man Without a Star. Rocksploitation movies, wherein Little Richard started to rock out, the cameras would play first over aghast faces of august revelers in their ball gowns and their tuxes, then to their feet, till suddenly one of those patent leather sporting toes would start to tap, and then back to the faces, where one at a time the shock is being transformed into pleasure, like the face of the man in last week's feature, who opened the door of the darkened room, hit the light switch, and 67 close friends yelled, "Surprise!" Why does that never happen to me? Before Little Richard's halfway through his first number, our socialites have, because this is what socialites do best, begun to dance, clumsily at first, but soon with brio, as though the music itself was all the instruction anyone required, as though dowagers in ball gowns and men in tuxes are born knowing all the moves. They just don't always know they know them. And the girl and boy are overjoyed. Always there's a girl and boy. And the plot demands that they have something noble, something worthy riding on this event. Down payment on a house, a little brother's operation. This couple that have already met so cute that we're aware that they're the pair that we're supposed to care about to make the happy ending happy. Don't get me wrong. I do not say these films were formulaic. Just there seemed to be an unwritten rule that every such film had to have a scene like this, and pretty early on. I wonder, could a film be made today the other way around? Like, for example, a room full of young people, not in fancy dress, of course, in the back room of a club somewhere, and maybe there for something other than music, dancing. Let's say they're there for, let's make it poetry. But a kind of poetry that's their own anthems, all angst and anger, itemizing all the imperfections of a society that has no place for me. And what's wrong with the lover who dumped me? Was that outrageous or what? And let's suppose that into this room walks, just for the sake of argument, stay with me here, walks this old man and sort of shambles up to the mic. And kids all look at him and wonder, does he even know where he is? And it's like somebody had just held up a sign that said, "And now for something completely different." Not knowing the unwritten rules, he talks about things they thought about but never thought to talk about, things they knew but didn't know they knew. And no, the young faces in that back room would never be aghast exactly, but as the cameras played over them, the polite blankness, mere tolerance in those faces might change. First to casual curiosity, then gradually to something else, something more engaged. And though we cannot see whether toes are tapping, and we presume not, still, there is some movement here and there as heads begin to nod, and maybe at the end, applause is real, heartfelt. And having asked myself whether such an exploitation film could be made, I answered for a dozen reasons, no. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. To Maria on her first birthday. Don't listen to your parents. They never did this before, and they don't know what they're talking about. Don't get me wrong, your parents are good people and can be counted on to do always the best they can as they understand it. The trouble is, there are a lot of things you have to help them understand. The things you like, easy. You just cool a little, flash that gorgeous smile, and they'll get it. They'll hold you up by your hands so you can walk around. They're always behind you when you're doing this so you can't see how ridiculous they look, all hunched over, feet spread out wide apart so they don't bump you, taking little baby steps to keep up with you and not fall over. They'll undergo this several minutes at a time just to keep you happy. It's things you don't like are the problem. You cry, they'll try to feed you. And if you toss your head and turn away from that, they'll check your bottom to see if you need changing. If you're still crying after they've changed you, they'll try to burp you. But anything more complicated, they run out of ideas. They'll say, maybe she's teething. And when you hear that, you'll know they've entered the no man's land between letting you cry and arguing about calling the doctor. Still, you're one of the lucky ones. Your parents wanted you from day one. I don't mean your birthday. Day one is something that happens sometime before your birthday. You'll learn later about day one. If I tried to tell you now, you wouldn't believe me. Talk about people getting into ridiculous positions. Sometimes people who have babies don't know what they're getting into. One woman sees another pushing a baby carriage on the street and makes that involuntary cooing sound that only women make, and that only like babies. Sound automatically followed by the thought, I want one of those. It's hardwired into women. There's also a guy involved, but sometimes he, like the man in the John Prine song, is hitting himself in the forehead asking, why does this happen to me? See, Maria, this is one messed up world you've come into, a world where you have to get a license to drive a car or cut hair or put a deck on your house, but given the proper plumbing and a little bit of luck, any couple can make a baby. Don't ask me to justify it, darling, because I can't. All I can tell you is it's been going on like this a long, long time, and as ridiculous as it all may seem, it has worked just well enough that there are a few more babies every year. And last year, one of those babies was you. And that in itself is cause for celebration. Your parents love you very, very, very much. And that kind of love and that number of berries is just enough, just barely enough to make it all work. Always remember to cut them a little slack, because they don't know what they're doing. They never did this before. They're making it up as they go along. We're the experts. If you need help with them, come to us. Signed, your great Aunt Carol and your pretty good Uncle Jack. Fourth ever Evergreen Invitational Poetry Slam.
I hear the host is a dick.
Yeah.
Is that you, Jack?
Which will be Saturday, March 7th, down in Marysville. And if you have, I can give you my card, go to Old John. It's called The Seventh Level. I told Old John my shark dream. I was on Nantucket going swimming, but I wanted to body surf and the sea was calm. So I decided to swim out to the horizon in search of better waves. I remember thinking in my dream, is this suicide? And answering, no, I'll find a way to make it back. When I was just a couple hundred yards from shore, it occurred to me that the water was unusually warm, and that warm water attracted sharks. I looked to my left and indeed saw several fins circling something in the water. Their distance from me was about double my distance from shore. I turned and started swimming back, trying to swim with strong and steady strokes, because anything that flounders or seems distressed attracts sharks. But I must have panicked a little because one shark broke off from the others and came straight toward me, coming much too fast for any hope that I might get to shore before he got to me. Everything I had ever heard about sharks flashed before my eyes. Most importantly, that resistance sometimes pays off, that you should hit them on the nose. I reflected that floating as I was in deep water, it was going to be hard to generate much power, but possible perhaps to deliver one quick, sharp blow. So I waited, treading water for the shark. And when he arrived, I delivered that quick, sharp blow, and then I woke up. And when I woke up, the dream was still very much with me. Not so much the fear of it, but the strategy. Did I do the right thing? Was it sharks that you bop on the nose, or was that a moose? What if you just shot? What if you just shoved your arm down the shark's throat the way I used to do with one of our collies who sometimes didn't understand where play stopped? I decided that probably wouldn't work on sharks. I asked old John about my dream, not so much what it meant, but why it lingered so with me after I was awake. He said it was because dreams are the 7th level of unreality. I said, is there an 8th level? He said, movies, novels, TV shows, anything where your emotions are engaged, but you're aware you're not personally involved. I pondered that for a minute and asked, what's the 6th level? He smiled and opened his hands and said, this, all this. I don't give good phone. Phone intimidates me. Every conversation goes too long, highlighting how little I have to say, even to my friends. Then when I hang up, I always think of something I should have said, but couldn't think, intimidated as I was. And because I didn't say it, my friends might think I don't value them. I want to call them back straightway, amend the record, but then they wouldn't wonder what was the matter with me. They would know. Stephen Dobbins says every poem at some point comes to be about its own completion. That concept keeps popping up in odd contexts, like phone calls. The instant when you've just ticked off your last agenda item and awkwardness is kicked in, and all you want is to get off, but if you're obvious about it, it's like saying, you have nothing to offer me beyond what I have already culled. Often the best that I can do is, listen, I've got to let you go now. As though something was boiling over on the stove, or the phone police were banging on my door, bellowing something about a warrant. I was on the phone once with an aunt of mine, mother of 9, and I heard a tremendous crash in the background at her end. She just kept right on talking till I asked, what was that crash? She said, that was just Brendan falling through the skylight. Now that woman gave good phone. It's not that I don't like most people, I like you. I just don't want to talk to you on the phone. It isn't you, it's me. No, it isn't me either, it's the fact of the phone. When the phone rings, there's something imperious about it, a command. Answer me, answer me, answer me, answer me, which used to be a lot easier because at least you knew where the fucking thing was. I made phone calls for Obama on election day. Hardly anybody answered, and for hours it was to voicemails that I read the script they gave me. If you got one of my messages, you'd think, this guy gives great message. He's a natural. The second coming to the phone of James Earl Jones. You would be so pumped. They had so many volunteers that they ran out of phones. I had more minutes than I'll ever need, so I went to my cell. And that afternoon, people started calling me back. Who to punt now? When my parents died 6 months apart, I was away at prep school, where the only phones in the dorm belonged to faculty. My advisor, gentle Mr. Armstrong, school librarian, had to hunt me down and in his bathrobe lead me up 3 flights of echoing stairs to the phone in his apartment. When I hung up, I said, my mother died. I know, he said. I'm sorry. Later, my father's dead. I know. I'm sorry. When I'm awakened by the phone, can it possibly be good news? Will it ever be Sweden calling with my Nobel Prize, unaware of the time difference? No. When the phone rings at 2 a.m., the only question is, who died? The only answer, someone very dear. By noon, the odds have shifted in my favor. So what time does the phone turn innocent? Where draw the line and how? People die all hours. How convince my heart that now it's safe? On rare occasions when I admit phone phobia, I sometimes cite those Mr. Armstrong moments, thereby putting everyone defensive. And maybe there's some merit to that argument. But it's too easy answer, a handy procedural motion for closure before discussion closes in on something really dangerous. What that danger is, I do not know. And we have on the other side, because this poem is nothing if not fair and balanced, the lover who insists I keep my phone turned on because there are still, after all this marriage, times that she just wants to hear my voice. Because there is always love. The memory of those sweet, long evenings and the first blush of infatuation, when you have run out finally of all the commonplaces of the day, your secrets, but not out of energy. This energy is boundless. And you've stubborned through the you have to hang up first, no, you first impasse. Each wanting this to never end, just dangle on the line and listen to the other breathe, knowing if you were together now, there'd be a simple and emphatic way to resolve this welter of tempestuous, exultant ecstasy. And ecstasy it truly is. Your soul really does stand outside your body, somewhere out in phone space, meeting your lover halfway. And the distance, very length of wire or microwave between is rendered an ingenious sexual device prolonging this, postponing that. I've had a few of those calls, not those devices. And yes, they do justify the rest, or almost do. If I could come to see the phone as that vehicle of love, then maybe, just perhaps, I could undo incompetences, not come to a rapprochement, train myself to keep my phone about my person, tune myself to turn it on just before she calls instead of just after. Maybe there would be hope. But I'm too old to change and call it what it really is, the devil's instrument of my discomfiture. Listen, I've got to let you go now. This is a poem about racism, duplicity, and the dark side of rock and roll. I never heard as much excitement from a radio as the day a teenage engineer named Arnie Ginsberg came running into the WORL studio, delivering the new Pat Boone cover of Fats Domino's Ain't That a Shame. Oh, the times, oh, the way of doing things. The hottest DJ in Boston was a young guy named Joe Smith, who called himself Jose and never mentioned that he'd gone to Yale. Now he's head of MGM or RCA or one of them. He favored rhythm and blues, but he'd play anything. One night, this new record, Crazy Arms, unlike anything any of us had ever heard, with these weird piano runs and this unknown singer with a terrible obsession for filling up the spaces between phrases and lines. Well, my yearning heart keeps saying, you're not mine, not mine, not mine, not mine. Jose hated it. He said, if this makes the top 10 tomorrow night, I'll eat the record. Tuesday night it came in 8 or 9, and he said, I didn't mean the top 10, I meant the top 3. And Wednesday it was 3, and he said, I didn't mean I'd eat the record. Nobody can eat a record, but I'm a man of my word, and I'll eat the next best thing, my hat. And we heard eating noise right on the air. It sounded a lot like pizza. The kid that sang Crazy Arms billed himself as Jerry Lee Lewis and his pumping piano. This was before it was even clear what the instrument of rock and roll would be. Ray Charles, Fats Domino, Little Richard all played piano. It would be a few weeks yet before the guitar took charge. I loved Crazy Arms, but I liked the other side even better, End of the Road. Well, the way is dark, the night is cold. It's not even 2 minutes long. In it you can hear the opening chords of Whole Lotta Shakin' that a few months later made Jerry Lee a rock and roll hero. Until he married his 13-year-old cousin. And the night he showed up at Graceland waving a pistol, I never thought he wanted to hurt Elvis. I think he wanted to put a bullet through that goddamn guitar. Even that wasn't the end of his road. Now Elvis is dead, arguably. Jerry Lee is still out there singing great country, billing himself not as the king, but as the killer. And indeed, some of his wives have died curious deaths. But the song. A while back I saw Mom's Mabley on TV, and for her finish that great old black woman said, I'm gonna do a song I wrote a lot of years ago. And her hips began to rock, and a barrel house piano kicked in, and she sang, the way is dark, the night is cold. And I went looking for my old yellow label Sun 45. When I found it, the name on it wasn't Mabley. But that doesn't mean she didn't write the song. New York and Philly are filled with aging white gangsters still raking in royalties from songs sold to them by black artists in the 50s for $100 because the way is dark and the night is cold. 128. Lucretius was a Roman poet who wrote a huge, long, epic poem about Roman science. And one of his ideas that physicists actually like these days is that everything is composed of atoms and void. 128 is a road that makes a half circle around Boston from the South Shore, from the South Shore to the North Shore. Lucretius on 128. Tire rolls forward, hubcap spins. At any instant, the whole top half is moving forward, bottom, back. What of the single point at the very center? If points above are moving one way, points below the other, logic demands one single point that doesn't rotate at all. This is what I aspire to, the still point at the center. While everybody spins their wheels, they know where to find me. I stand out like the face in the crowd at the tennis match in the Hitchcock movies, staring at his prey, while every other face follows the ball back and forth, till your eye is irresistibly drawn to the one still point, the murderer's face. But how can there be a still point at the center, attached to a point above that's moving forward and one below moving back? How can a point not choose between, not go with one, yet not be torn? Only one answer possible. Nothing really is attached. It is, as physicists and Buddhists and Lucretius assert, every object, atoms and void, night sky, ocean of darkness, here and there a point of light. It is we impose upon this ocean organization to satisfy our need for the delusion of understanding. Call this frequency black. Call this black surface road. Call this road 128. Call this town Burlington. Call this direction forward. Call this collection of atoms me. And it all works until the moment you realize that although you know where you are, here, you don't know where here is, or what this new black surface is called. In the glove compartment, a map, and on that map a spot that represents where you are now. But your spot has no name. White area among meandering lines. Oh, the people in the houses know where here is, but they don't know who you are. So you have no expectation they might help you. It's very dark, you're low on gas. It's some consolation that the road map in the glove compartment is folded perfectly, but not much.